You know, when people talk about the law, they often throw everything into one big pot, as though public law, private law, equity law, contract, statute is all the same thing, but it isn't. And understanding that difference, like really understanding it, is the cornerstone of stepping into your own authority. So today I would like to break this down. I want to look at public law, what its primary domain is and why. If you're operating in the private, it doesn't apply to you in the way that most people think it does, because this is where the confusion starts for most people. Yes, hello, it's me, Chris with a K, and I hope you're all well today. So, public law, the primary domain. So let's start right at the top. Public law is what governs the relationship between the state and the individual. And even the word individual has its own connotations. But that's what constitutional law is. It sits under public law. It's designed to define the structure of government and how it operates and where the limits of its power lie. Now on paper, that sounds great. Legal limits on government power. In theory, that's supposed to protect the rights of individuals. It's the foundation of democracy, they say. But ask yourself, in practice, does it? Look around. Government departments, councils, police, the courts, all operating under statutes and legislation that most people have probably never read, let alone consented to. And yet they have the authority over you. Why? Because you are seen as part of that public system. You're operating in the public. The question, what's it got to do with you? Now here's the key question. If you're standing in the private, what's public law got to do with you? That's at the heart of this whole conversation. You can't mix the two. They don't blend. They're like oil and water. We know this when we look at trust law, commerce, or even common sense. Every system has its own domain, and the moment you step into one, you're bound by those rules. So how can something that exists purely in the public, like the Constitution, have any authority over somebody standing in the private? It can't. The Constitution is a public document. It was written by men for the public to govern bodies and to define relationships within that structure. It has nothing to do with private man or woman standing in their own right. Written by man for control. And here's the thing. People often treat the Constitution as though it is some kind of sacred document, almost holy in nature. But it isn't. It was written by men, it's administered by men, and it exists to regulate men within a legal fiction framework. That's all law is. A system of agreements, assumptions, and contracts to govern behaviour inside the framework. It's not divine, it's not natural, it's man-made. And when something is man-made, it's limited to the jurisdiction of the man who made it, so it can only apply within that system. But you don't need their permission to exist. The illusion of rights in the public. Now, public law loves to talk about rights. The right to free speech, the right to privacy, the right to fair treatment. But what good are those rights when they can be taken away at a stroke of a pen or suspended during a national emergency? That's not a right, that's a privilege. And privileges belong in the public. You only have to look at what's happening right now. People being silenced online, people being arrested for speaking freely. So, is there really free speech in public? I would say not. But in the private, you do have free speech because it is your unalienable right given by the Creator, not by a man-made system. And that's the key distinction. Public law offers privileges, private law recognises rights. And that's the line you have to draw very clearly in your own understanding. Conversion, birth and bondage. See, from birth, something happens that most people never question. Conversion takes place, an illegal conversion. Your living being, the natural man or woman, is converted into a legal person. A piece of paper, a certificate of fiction. That's what gets registered. That is what the state deals with. Not you, the living being, but the legal entity that they created. And from that moment you are bound into a system of bondage, a web of public contracts, obligations, taxes and duties that were never disclosed to you. That's the trick. That's how they get jurisdiction. But once you realise it, you can correct it. You can step back into your rightful position as settlor, creditor and beneficiary of that trust. That's where the real power lies. Control from the private. Now, when you stand as settlor beneficiary, you control that fiction and you're not liable for it. You can protect it, operate through it, even use it in commerce, but you are not it. That's a vital distinction. The governments, the courts, the police, they can interact with the legal entity, but they have no authority over you, the living man, woman, unless you consent. Think of it like a company director. The director manages the company, but the company is a separate legal entity. If the company gets fined, the director doesn't automatically go to jail. Why? Because they're acting in a different capacity. It's exactly the same principle. You, in the private, act on behalf of your legal entity in the public, but you are not that entity. You're not the one being bound by their rules, unless you choose to stand there. The role of duty and authority. Now, of course, you do still have a duty of care, because you are the creator of that entity. It's your creation, and like any creation, it needs to be governed. And that's why you act as its protector, its guardian, its trustee, but you do so from the private. You control it, it doesn't control you. So if somebody says, oh, we're going to find your name, or we're going to summon that person, that's fine. That's their jurisdiction. But that's not you. You can authorise or deny those actions. You have the authority because you're the settlor. They can't move without your consent. And that's how you reclaim your power. The locked prison of legislation. Think of legislation as a prison. Every piece of it, every act, every statute is just another bar on the cage. Each one locks you in a little tighter into the public system. Now imagine you've got a piece of paper sat on your bedside table. That's your legal fiction. That's your person. And every time you engage with the system as that person, you're essentially putting that piece of paper back into the prison cell. They can lock up the name. They can fine the name. They can legislate for the name. But you, the living being, you remain free as long as you don't step into the cell with it. That's why understanding the difference between operating in the private and the public isn't just legal theory, it's practical freedom, the entanglement of contracts. Now here's where it gets messy. Over time we have been entangled in hundreds of public contracts, most of them invisible. We sign up for benefits, licenses, bank accounts, insurances, digital IDs, without even realise what it is that we're agreeing to. Every one of those contracts pulls you into the public deeper. They call them soft contracts, adhesion contracts. Basically contracts that you're assumed to have agreed to because you didn't say no. That's how they keep people bound. But once you can recognise it, you can choose differently. You can learn to operate from the private with clarity, intent, and without mixing jurisdictions, acting as the solicitor, not the defendant. Think of it this way. When a solicitor represents a client, they act on the client's behalf. They handle the paperwork, the communications, the court appearances, but they themselves aren't the party. If the client gets fined, the solicitor doesn't pay it. If the client gets charged, the solicitor doesn't go to jail. Why? Because the solicitor is acting for the legal entity. That's exactly what you do when you're in the private. You act as the solicitor, the agent, the representative for the entity that exists in the public. But you never become the entity. You never step into that role. That's the separation of capacities that keeps you free. Commerce and tax, the real game. At the end of the day, all of this, all of the law, governance, all the legislation, it's all about commerce. It's about trade, tax, control. That's the game. That's the system. Every fine, every license, every permit is just a commercial transaction. Tax. When you see it for what it is, it loses its power. It's not about moral authority. It's just business. Once you step into the private, you start managing your affairs like a business does, but one that you control, not one that controls you. Bringing it all together. So let's bring this full circle. Public law, that's the primary domain. It governs the state, the departments, the councils, the police, the courts, all the public actors. It's constitutional, it's legislative and administrative. That's their realm. The private, that's where you live, breathe and exist as a living being. That's where all your unalienable rights are found. It's where you hold authority, not permission. Public and private do not mix. And once you understand that, the whole illusion of control starts to dissolve. Final thoughts. So when somebody says the Constitution gives me rights, remember, no, it doesn't. It grants privileges within the public domain. Your real rights exist beyond that system. in the private. The public was built to regulate those who consent to it. The private was created to empower all those that understand it. And so when you step into that truly, not just intellectually, but in practice, you start living as the creator, not the creation. You realise that the Constitution, the government, the courts, they all operate under a set of rules that you can observe, respect, but never have to belong to. Because your power, your rights, your authority come from within, not from paper, not from Parliament, and certainly not from permission. And that's the essence of it. Public and private do not mix. The Constitution is public law, and public law is the domain of the state. Your domain is in the private. And once you stand there, no one can move you. Well, that's what I've been discovering anyway. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I shall speak to you all again soon. Bye for now.